Back here on the north shore of Lake Mead, still searching for spring, even as temperatures continue to warm. It's not always for the greenery, sometimes much more for the scenery. Got lots of invasive mustards in these lower north shore washes, as we may be coming to expect. Shrubs are greening up quite a bit more than 2 weeks ago, as are subshrubs, Seralcia. So, without the annuals, I mean, a lot of this shrubbery and subshrubbery, pretty common stuff that you're not going to run into as unique members of this flora necessarily. So even though there's promising parts of greenest thing on this slope, except for that piece of trash. We are on raised, dry ground that was clearly former seashore. Quite interesting what's happening here ecologically. You can tell this was former wetland, basically, not only by the presence of the shells, but by the presence of all the really suffering tamaracks. That's what all the sticks are, with aggregates of mustards, all from Eurasia, clustered at their bases. So as the water levels retracted over time, they were left high and dry, quite literally. And while some of them are hanging on, they won't be here forever. So that's pretty interesting to me. Wouldn't take much for some crews to come in and finish them off, I think. They're pretty vulnerable in this state. For the Park Service, this is how it's done. It's pretty easy, guys. I literally just stepped on that one. See how weak they are? And most of this material is practically dead. And it keeps trying to shoot up from the base again, is what's happening. There's a lot of good restoration work to do here. Get it back to native desert uplands. Native low desert uplands, as opposed to the riparian corridor, which this no longer is. It's a Euichnidierans up there. The rock nettle. Lots of this dead tamarack scrap. Look at it. Even some pusiphyllums here and there. Looking quite green and sometimes flowering. Compared to the stuff close to the water, it's thriving. Leaving the shore for a bit to check out the red badlands out there. Might be some gypsum-y stuff as well. Coast is down there. So again, this is what the highest form of disturbance in riparian areas looks like in the Mojave, at least. Tamaricks dying back. Proliferate fields of invasive mustards to a state of profusion. Some of the native shrubs just barely starting to establish again. Creosote, namely, is well suited to living everywhere, of course, that isn't wet. And very little else native coming back. So when was the water last year, probably? What age of creosote is that? I'm not actually ecologically qualified to speculate, but it hasn't been too long, obviously. Those are smaller. And tells you the water was probably retracted from this point pretty recently by the long-term persistent drought of the region. Who knows what native annuals may be in these highly disturbed fields, but it doesn't look like really much of anything going by the old husks, which are generally recognizable to the genus most times, if not even the species. Really a sad sight, but perhaps on its way to recovery. Thought it was a gunshot, but they were just knocking horns. Gave me great pause. I really did think I heard a gunshot. Around the corner I find these gang of dudes. I knew the trails here were a little intense for the burros, so that makes sense. Created by some of the best mountaineers around. Clustering together against the foe. What a group. If you've never seen them before, they are desert bighorns. Can't give you a Latin name on that, unfortunately. I think it's considered a subspecies of broader Western North American bighorn group, though. Not necessarily its own distinct species. Clearly differently adapted to things than Rocky Mountain bighorns, who are poking around the snow right about now. Distinct physiologies to be certain, so they're eating vegetation with vastly different chemical signatures than plants of the Rocky Mountains have. Your Sphaeroceas to your Ambrosias to your old mustards. They're clearly thriving despite lack of annuals, so they're eating this stuff. And you'd have to imagine and make an animal of the Rocky Mountains kind of sick to eat some of this stuff, you know? Glare of the sun on those horns is something else. Directly below, they could kick down rocks and kill me if they want. It seems as though they respect me and have let me pass. Getting into some of the red badlands now, formerly riparian habitat, clearly. I'm sure those sentinels of this place are still keeping tabs on me, making sure I'm not causing any havoc in their community. Like those coyotes and such, you know? Badlands seem to be made of lots of gypsum, so maybe we'll see some specials today. Even if the botany is underwhelming, it is a very fine first day of March. Almost perfect temps. There's still life nonetheless. I'm not indoors. Always had a fondness for badlands, and I'm quite happy to find them here. It's crispy graveyard of Phacelias, Plantagos, and others. I mean, I guess it'd have to rain right now for them to come out this year, right? Like 2 inches tomorrow. Else it's getting a bit late. There's definitely a lot of interesting vegetation out here, but I haven't run into any gypsumites yet. Place like this, absolute hell when it's too warm, but absolute paradise when temps are just right, as with today. Got a couple more gypsum patches before heading up the north slope of Black Mesa to what appears to be a simple traverse across the top and drop back down the other side towards where I'm parked. That's the black and table-like one before me. This is more like northwest slope, so looks like a gentler ascent towards the northeast slope. Up on the broad expanse of Black Mesa now. Not much to see or speak about. It's probably only alive up here handful of months every decade on the average. Here basically ends our tours of the Lake Mead shore for the season. Might be back here once more, but otherwise it's time to find some new stuff higher up when the time comes. Go back to the Newberries once, probably no point, but it's close and interesting to me. Nonetheless, a bit lower than here, so perennials will have progressed, and then spend lots of time in some far-flung corners of the springs and head up north quite a bit. I'm excited to do that, actually. North is where it's at this year.